Good morning and welcome everyone to this January 29th, 2025 policy session of the Library District Board of Directors. District Administrator Gary Schmidt, please do the roll call for us.
Thank you, Chair Roberts. Director West is out of the office today. Roll call, Director Schrader.
Here.
Director Fireside.
Here.
Director Savas.
Present.
Chair Roberts.
Here. Thank you, Gary. Would you please introduce the first session for us?
Yes, thank you. And as you have mentioned, Chair, you are now meeting as the Library Services District Board of Directors of Clackamas County. This session is policy session, Clackamas County Library District background and proposed Library District Task Force. Our staff from Transportation and Development and County Administration will present. Please come forward. Sarah Ekman, Assistant Director of Transportation and Development, and Everett Wild, Policy Advisor for the Board of County Commissioners. Welcome, and go ahead, please.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. Good morning, Chair Roberts and Commissioners. I am Sarah Ekman, Assistant Director with the Department of Transportation and Development, and part of our department's responsibilities are the Library District Administration when it comes to the financing. So we're here to tell you a little bit about the background of that district this morning. The district was established in 2008 upon the passing of ballot measure 3310. The purpose of it was to provide a dedicated, stable funding source for the support of library services in the county and increase revenue to help existing city and county-operated libraries meet standards set by the Oregon Library Association. Upon the approval of that measure, the Board of County Commissioners adopted a master order to form the district. So that took place shortly thereafter. The cities in the county that operated libraries entered into intergovernmental agreements with each other and with the county. This master IGA outlines all of the pieces that go into managing the libraries within the library district, including funding, operations, governance, amendments, termination, and enforcement details for all those who participate. The permanent property tax is 0.3974 per 1,000 of assessed value and is divided into 13 individual library service areas. The entire county is covered with the exception of Johnson City in the library district. All of the funds collected in the district are used and distributed by us in the county. So DTD has a library district budget component. 100% of the funds that are collected in the district are passed through to all of the libraries. And that does include all of the city-operated libraries, as well as the two that the county operates, which is Gladstone and Oak Lodge. No district funds are utilized for the administration of the library district or the support of the county component, which is the library network office. So any costs that are incurred for the district are passed through library network, which is funded by the county through general funds. When all of this came to be, the Board of Commissioners also provided each library city with a one-time capital contribution of $1 million for the various library capital improvements that needed to be done. And then once that was distributed, it was left up to the cities to continue to provide any funding beyond the library district funds. I mentioned our library network office that's operated here at the county with general funds. So the county committed to providing the centralized support services through the library network office when the district was established, and that program originated in 1989. So we committed to providing services that are outlined in the sections of the IGAs at the level that was provided at the time of the formation of the district. As you can imagine, library services have changed quite a bit since 2008, and so we continue to evolve and work within our constraints to be able to provide those services. But the resources required to maintain those services is definitely increased. And let's see, some of our libraries do struggle to meet the needs of our communities given what's provided through those library district funds. So we do our best to provide everything we can through Library Network, and they do a stellar job of supporting all the libraries. Some of the most notable pieces that they are known for is the courier and the sort service. If you haven't seen them in action, they do a great job. We have a 2-minute video that shows you what that sort looks like. It's all mechanized. And then they also provide IT support for our libraries in the county, which is beyond the county. It's also our city libraries. I'll turn it over to Everett.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good morning. Everett Wild, Policy Advisor in County Administration. So back in August of last year, the board at the time held a policy session on libraries to kind of go over the history that Sarah just shared. It was a little more in depth, but same general history. And from that, the board approved moving forward with some exploratory work on identifying issues that the county and our city partners have identified with the current structure and the current financing levels and the current master IGA. In order to prepare for that, with the help of Administrator Schmidt, we put together a small kind of kitchen cabinet group that met one time in November for a sit down, get stuff up on the whiteboard brainstorming meeting. And the results of that are in your packet as attachment A. Those are the issues, the first page are the issues that group identified. That kitchen cabinet group had a library director, the link manager, a mayor, a county commissioner, or a library district director, rather. So we sat down and came up with kind of this comprehensive list of things that we have heard from cities and their library directors, from county staff, from members of the public. The LDAC chair was a member of that kitchen cabinet. Out of that, we are proposing to put together a task force, which is identified on the second page of attachment A, that would spend a few months, not super long, but long enough to roll up our sleeves and deal with some of these big gnarly issues, that would address and make recommendations to the library district board on the topics identified on the first page. So the makeup of that task force, as proposed on the second page of attachment A, would be one of you, a library district director from the board, 2 mayors, the district administrator, 2 city managers, 2 library directors, 2 members of the public, an ex officio member in the link manager, and we have considered hiring a professional consultant to provide facilitation meeting management support. So seeking your, well, first of all, if you have any questions with anything that Sarah or I said, and then any questions or direction you have on moving forward with the task force.
So I think we'll start with questions. Colleagues, Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, no questions. Well, I do have some questions, actually, because I was here in 2008 and was deeply involved in passing that bond and campaigned for it, helped hire a campaign manager, and that was when George Hoyt was here, and George was a real mover and shaker, and we were able to really make this pass. And also a shout out to Jan Zinzer, who was able to orchestrate these IGAs, but it's been 16 years. And I guess my question is, I know the technology has changed, and how has Link been able to keep up with all of that? You know, I mean, is that been our responsibility, am I correct, as the county, to make sure that that was our auspice, was that notion that we would be the centralized area for all the technology?
We do. We have an amazing technical staff and some leadership at Link that has done their very best to keep up with technology. And within the constraints of the IGA, they look to what they can do with what they're charged and funded to do. They've made some amazing strides, even in this last year, to find ways to revamp technology and realize some cost savings in areas like firewalls, that kind of thing, that have been able to bring them forward and provide excellent, security and IT infrastructure while saving the county dollars. But they've been very creative in how they do that. And then if there's items that aren't within the realm of the IGA, they work with each of the libraries through the library directors group to plan for what can, they can partner on. If the cities can, there's certain things within the budgets that are reimbursable, so Link will provide the leadership and the procurement oversight to procure those items, and then there are certain technology pieces that the libraries will then reimburse Link for. so that the whole system can move forward and they can keep up with technology. But we have had limitations in the past. We now have the text capability on your phone, but we didn't always have that when other neighboring jurisdictions did. So they do an incredible job of finding ways to bring the technology forward to stay current within the constraints of what they have.
When was the last time we spent any money on upgrading the system? Do you know? Or
It's an ongoing piece.
Okay, so it's built in every,
It's built in. They've done a lot of capital planning, and they're able to, they do pieces every year
okay.
to
That they
progress the
kind of
system.
stand to do that. And in terms of across the county, have we been seeing some inequalities in terms of service delivery system, cities, not being able to keep up with one another? For example, I live in Lake Oswego, and the city does contribute tremendous amounts of dollars to the library. Lake Oswego reads, all of these other things. But I started out in Canby and helped build their library system, and they've struggled to stay open. So is that one of the issues we're going to be dealing with here as we move forward with this conversation?
There are definitely varying levels of, financial contributions across the libraries, absolutely. And the service delivery at each library does vary based on their resources that they have at their disposal. So some cities, like I said, do contribute, and others are not able to.
To contribute as much. That's-
Additional, in addition to the library district revenue.
And one of the things, though, that we had hoped was that each city would consider a contribution to their own library and not just depend solely on the district dollars. And I think for me, that's a conversation that needs to happen at C4 and really work with our cities to make sure that they're contributing to what is, to me, a fundamental service that we all need. Also because libraries, are sometimes only the access point for people who may have no computers or underserved or access to technology. So I'd like to see that as part of the conversation. I know Commissioner Savish, you've been really involved in that, and I'd like to get that straightened out. And the other thing I remember is capital construction. There's been some capital construction done with some of these district monies. Is that correct? Thank you.
The cities have had the discretion to utilize the library district funding in ways to support their library. Yes, and so.
And I don't object to that, but I know that there's been chatter, I guess, about it. And, if you don't have the building, really, you're not going to have a library. So I understand that, but I think that's another issue that needs to be more clarified in terms of what the uses of the dollars are, because I think it's caused some consternation between groups, if I'm not mistaken. And then we also have the Hoodland issue, where we had an agreement with Sandy that they would have it as a satellite library, and I'm hearing that that isn't workable anymore.
I believe Administrator Schmidt has some additional information on that.
Long history with this, commissioners. I know
Oh.
we have two new commissioners, but yes,
Yeah.
the city of Hoodland, the Hoodland Library is operated by the city of Sandy.
Right.
But they are there's some financial constraints on their ability to continue operating. And representatives of the Hoodland Library last year asked the Board of Commissioners for a short-term financial support to help with their rent. And the prior board kind of deadlocked on that and did not make a final decision.
Yeah.
But they do say they need financial support, and they're asking for that from the county to help the Hoodland Library continue to operate by paying the rent. That's another discussion item for, not today, but for the board to have as well.
Well, that's what I was going to ask too, because we've also helped the unincorporated area have access to a library, and that is still under the auspice of the county directly. Am I correct with that?
Yes, Gladstone and Oak Lodge Libraries,
Yeah.
yes.
So we have a precedent for that, although the purpose of this was really to just have us do the technical piece and have the cities do the direct service with, if I remember this right, Paul, it's the surrounding areas of the unincorporated area. So that's another thing that needs to be looked at, because if we're going to be in the library business directly, we should probably, if we've done something for one group, I'm looking at, well, does that put us in a position to do something for the other? But we really do need to stick to the notion that it's centralized in cities that are serving not just the city, but the surrounding. Hence the district, that's why we call it a district.
Commissioner Schrader, you're 3 for 3. All of those topics that you brought up, the
Right.
boundaries, Hoodland, and the use of capital, district funds for capital, are all on the list that the task force would be asked to
Yeah.
to make a recommendation to you all on.
And I would expect too, frankly, nobody likes to raise taxes, but we found when we ran this last campaign that because it was so library-related, it really was an easier lift than we thought it would be, but it might be an opportunity to look at the millage rate and, see what we can do because things have changed and costs have gone up. So that's all I have, sir. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, thank you. Staff did a great job in trying to, we can certainly get in the weeds and talk here for hours, but we're not going to do that today. But I think add a little bit of history, and Commissioner Schrader was part of this. But back in 2001, the county commissioner set about to create a forum or a platform to talk about some of the infrastructure. And so C4 was basically formed out of that. I was at that meeting with the cities and the districts, and therefore C4 was formed, and its focus was land use and transportation. But we heard some loud voices from the cities, and Martha was there, almost especially in 2004, I remember it, a very outspoken mayor from Sandy. She was a strong advocate, and it was basically the claim, and she wasn't the only one, the claim was that the unincorporated areas are basically using services provided by the cities but not paying for it, this inequity. So that was the genesis of how the district was discussed. I'm giving you the short story. So the county set about to say, okay, cities, you all have this issue. Some libraries are updated, some are not. And they set about with the leadership of that time, somewhat leadership. I mean, Scott Lazenby was a city manager for Sandy.
Remember that?
Genius. I always, brilliant guy. He's retired now, but I always, he was very, very diplomatic, very, very wise, and worked with all the cities. And so the district, basically the framework for this master IGA and the formulas and everything else, that was a city-driven solution for the most part, in hand with some of the library directors at the time and so forth. And again, I'm giving you the short story. So it was formed, and I think what we learned after it was formed, that there were some, as time went on, there were some inequities. The funding was meant to, as Martha kind of outlined, was meant to augment services provided by the city. It wasn't, the library district wasn't designed, or the tax rate wasn't designed to just replace city funding. It was to augment. And that all the cities, or all the libraries in the future, would be within cities. So that was the design. Well, there were a couple mistakes or errors, oversights that weren't really considered. And I'll use the Gladstone model, where a very tiny city with a very small population had a halo, I call it the halo, but the ring around, the unincorporated ring around the cities was basically, essentially, if you can visualize that, the service boundaries for the revenue collection that we factored in, so that Gladstone would get those revenues, tax AV revenues for that millage rate, that would be part of their revenue stream. However, they didn't have a library of any size to serve 26, 30,000, whatever that number was, 40,000 people. So long story short, that came to the board in 2014, kind of exploded. There was disagreement amongst us at the time, the past commissioners, and Gladstone got upset, and then we had a legal battle. The legal settlement out of that battle resulted basically in the one library, two location model. So now Coppell County agreed to settle this inequity, to agree to be a library city of sorts. And, so we're covering that. So what we have today, the other things have popped up out of that. So things have been bubbling up about, this Estacada issue, I won't go there deeply, but basically the premise and idea was that if there were extra revenues, reserves, that ultimately they would be able to build capital. But there was an exception at the time, because Estacada had a measure on the ballot, and we had to let that time out before legally we could actually do that. But the Board of County Commissioners never did that, unfortunately. We didn't solve that problem. And some people believed, oh, it was never meant to be that way, and some believed, actually, it was meant to be that way. So there was another dispute. But so anyhow, a number of things have bubbled up out of this thing, and the one I think that is probably, that I feel probably the most pain with, if you will, is that people who pay into the library district funds, who pay this millage rate, don't all have equal access or hours. So there are some libraries that have great services and great hours, and there are some libraries that do not. Another thing that's bubbled up is that some of the cities felt, wait a minute, where you drew those boundary lines wasn't right, wasn't fair. Those people are coming to our library, but the other city is getting revenue. So all these things are in the attachment of issues to be solved. And, we're kind of approaching this as a global solution. I really think that overall, the library district history is really more of a good story than is a bad one. And a lot of great things happened. But again, I think expenses outpacing revenues is a reality that we all see, and I think that's another challenge here that's spelled out. But we're on a good path, but I think that we've got a good proposal to try and iron these out. And the other thing that wasn't said is that there will be an assemblage and discussion amongst the library directors, with the city managers. All the groups will have an opportunity to opine in and report back to this task force to come up with a solution. And at that point, it'll come back before us. Hopefully, if we have consensus among everyone else on what that solution and all those solutions look like, and then we can talk about it. But that's a short story, and I'm happy to meet with anyone here in the room, my colleagues, to kind of give you some of those in-depth things. But the Sandy Library, the Hoodlin Library, there's a lot more background to that and agreements in place that was part of the arrangement, again, city-driven, not county-driven at the time. That's my...
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Savas. Commissioner Fireside?
Yes, thank you both for coming today. I appreciate it. So can you, since we're here to talk about the task force creation specifically, can you give me an idea of the actual months that we're talking? Are we talking 4 months, 8 months? I've just heard different conclusions. So could you?
In an ideal
Elaborate,
world,
please.
we'd like to wrap it up in about 6.
Okay. And do you think that 10 is enough? Because I remember in its original iteration, it was like 60 people. I mean, it was a lot, right? So
Correct.
do you feel like 10 is a scope that would cover everything that's on the list?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There before COVID, there was a larger task force that was recommended. It had some funding through DTD. It had 60 or 70 people. They were going to break into subcommittees. We are hoping to be more nimble. The issues are still as big, as meaty and gnarly as ever, but we're hoping that this smaller group can really roll up their sleeves, be a little easier to manage, easier to facilitate, and that small size can help us move through to recommendations back to you as the district board sooner. We are committed to having a balance of different positions. That's why we've got some elected representation. We've got experts. We've got ex officio member in the link services area, and then we're also committed to having kind of urban and rural balance. So we want to make sure that everyone has a voice at the table. So
Excellent.
hopefully we're balancing it.
Okay, great, thank you. And then Administrator Schmidt, I do have a question. Could you give us an update on the Hoodland request and where we are with that? Since Commissioner Schrader brought it up, I just wondered, and then how we expand
Sorry,
into a
Gary.
broader conversation about that, please.
No, it's okay. Thank you. It is on
Thank you.
hold until such time as one of you directors wants to bring it up for a public discussion or for a discussion or direct me to further research it. But it's just been on hold, waiting for board interest to discuss it again.
Thank you, that's all I have, Chair, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, real quick, and I didn't do it because I didn't want to get super in the weeds, and I'm not going to, but there's also other requests out there besides Hoodland. So there's the most recent one, because they're all hitting this financial wall. So the most recent one is the Oak Lodge Gladstone concerns as well. So, and this is not, again, I talked to Malala's got challenges, Canby's got challenges, so, that's why we need a global solution. And the other thing about Hoodland, I'll just say this, is that when we looked at their finances, they foresee that they'll be in trouble, but they don't have any urgent crisis today. So that's another thing. They have actually have reserves.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I think if there's no further questions, really what's before us is there an interest by the Board of County Commissioners to convene a task force to make recommendations to the board on several longstanding library issues, many of which of those have been discussed. So is there a motion on the table?
Chair, I move that we move forward with option 1 to form the task force as presented.
I'll second.
All right, so Commissioner Savas has moved to move forward on option 1. It's been seconded by Commissioner Schrader. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Clerk, would you do me a favor and call the poll?
Director Fireside.
Aye.
Director Schrader.
Aye.
Director Savas.
Aye.
Chair Roberts.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0, and the agenda is adopted. And do you have anything else, Gary, before we conclude?
If I may, so thank you. So what happens next is give us 2 or 3 weeks, maybe up to 1 month, to work as outlined in the staff report for staff to come and compile a list of recommended names for the task force, which we'll bring back to you for final approval, no later than a month, hopefully sooner. The next step is to get your approval on the names, and then the task force can begin its work. But no, that's it for this session. This is your last session for the day, Chair.
And I want to extend a thanks to both of you, Sarah and Everett, for your great presentation today, and thank you for your hard work. So with that, thank you all for coming today. The policy session is now adjourned.